Hi! Today we're going to build some very strong wooden made shelves for your garage or storage room. Stick around to see how I made them. I have a one-car garage which I use as a storage space and woodworking area. Like many storage rooms, we keep adding and adding to the point where you can barely walk around anymore. This is what just happened to me. It's time for some spring cleaning and reorganization. The far corner is where I will be placing the shelves. The idea is that instead of piling things on the floor and reduce the walking area, I can utilize the height of the room in a more efficient way. I will start by simply remove everything from one side of the garage to another. This is also a good moment to get rid of things I collected in time and never use. Once the area is empty, a good cleaning to the floor and walls is a must to get rid of those harmless but very annoying spider webs. Time to start building. I use standard construction lumber for this project. In my case I use some 2x3 which are already planed to a level and the size has been slightly reduced. However, don't make the mistake to think that this lumber is straight, because it isn't. For this project, however, we don't need to be really picky, so there is no need to joint the material any further. In order to cover the entire wall space I have available, I'll be building the structure using 8 posts, 4 in front and 4 at the back. But you'll see this later. Right now I start cutting the length of the rails where the shelves will be placed on. The structure will be about 7 feet wide by 9 feet high. The rails are placed at about 10 inches one above the other, which means I will need to make over 60 of them. The good thing is that each part I just cut I can simply re-saw in half with a table saw. I make sure that the blade is just slightly higher than the piece I need to cut, and using a push stick, eyewear and ear protection I start re-sawing each piece. Since the table saw fence is already set to the right width, it is a good idea to cut the reinforcement I will use for each shelf. More on this when I get to build the actual shelf, but right now I'm just cutting them all the same length, which is also the length of the shelf. Just like the rails, this part is also cut in half. To avoid splitting the wood when driving screws, I'm using a drill bit with a countersink installed to the drill press. I will make 4 holes to each of the 50-60 rails I cut earlier. Since I have no intention to measure each time where to drill the hole, I place 3 pieces of scrap wood around the rail, and by placing the rail against each side, I will be able to drill the hole always in the right place. If you remember earlier, I mentioned this structure is made out of 8 posts, 4 in front and 4 at the back. Here you see the first 2. The idea here is one post is the front one and the other is the back one. I've cut a piece of scrap that has the same width of the shelf. I will use this to space each rail. This will ensure avoiding making mistakes when measuring the distance between each rail. The process here is simple. Just keep moving the scrap of wood that represents the shelf and place the next rail till you get to the end of the 2 posts. Note that the rails are simply screwed to the post, as I do not use glue. 1, because 4 screws will be plenty strong, and 2, because if I decide to remove some of the rails, it will be much easier. This is one of the 4 posts ready. You could actually use it as a ladder, but this is not what this is for. And now I have all 4 posts ready. Pay attention here for a second. The 2 external only have rails on the inside, but the other 2 in the middle have rails on both sides. It's a little bit more work, but then again, the shelves will have to hang to something. Now for structure strength and keep everything together. I will place 4 long rails across the 4 posts, 2 on top and 2 on the bottom. And I will use one of the shelves I made off camera to make sure I space the posts correctly. But don't worry, I will show you how to make the shelves later. Once again, just like before, I'm not using any glue here. Just two large screws on each side and I pre-drill each hole. Just like the top side, I place two long rails across the bottom side. I use clamps to help me keeping the rails in the right position, but if you have someone to help you when building this, it can go a lot faster. With four rails placed, I can lift the structure and finally place it in the right position. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like the original design. However, we cannot just place the shelves. My garage floor is not really straight, so this structure with some heavy load could actually tilt forward, and even if the floor would be straight, it is still safer to screw it to the wall. I have a stone wall, so I don't need to find stud, which gives me more flexibility where to drill the holes. The wood I use is nearly 2 inches thick, and the screws are over 4 inches. So I decided to countersink the holes using a Forstner bit and adding a washer to the screw to avoid that when I drive the screw, I wouldn't push it too far in. To help me keeping the brackets straight and up, I use a clamp. Then I can pre-drill and screw them in position from both sides. Using one of the screws, I begin to drive it through the hole, but only slightly enough to leave a mark on the wall. I then pull it back and repeat this in each of the 6 holes. At this point, I remove the structure and using a drill with a hammer function, I create the holes on the wall. In each hole is then placed a plastic plug. This plastic plug will prevent the screw coming out of the wall once inserted. I use a mallet to push it flush with the wall. Now I can use the screw with the washer to mount the structure to the wall. Time to build the shelves. First, I cut a few parts that will make the top of the shelf. I start with a length and then recut them to width. Now remember that the structure placed on the wall was built based on the initial shelf I created earlier. So you need to make sure that all other shelves are completely the same to the original one. Finally, we can use the reinforcement we cut earlier. Originally I did cut them all the same, but later I took all the parts that would be placed on the back side of each shelf and removed a part from each side. This way, when you're placing the shelf on the rack, it will fit nicely without the rail being in the way. In fact, the amount removed from each side is the same width of the rail on the structure. This is the only part where I actually also used wood glue. I placed some weights on top and let the glue dry for about 30 minutes. I then came back, turned it around and pre-drilled few holes and screwed it all together. Now what do you think? It is extremely strong, even with some stuff on it, not much. It's nothing shakes, nothing moves. It is amazingly strong. You've seen me hanging from it. Right, so my wife asked me why didn't I just buy those metal ones, like 3 of those metal ones that you can buy at the hardware shop. Well, the thing is, I have one of those, and I had it for years. But the problem is, first of all, is nowhere close as strong as this, as stable as this. Even though I've screwed it to the wall and I have a cement wall here, when you touch it, it shakes. But most importantly, the way those metal ones work is that the shelves, you put them in at the hole, they have holes here on the side. You put in at the hole that you actually need, and then you put screws in, bolts and nuts or whatever it is that they come with. And believe me, after years of having that, even though I might sometimes need to change the height of those shelves, I never do. It's way too much work. This, completely different. Let's say that one day I'm done with this. I don't need this anymore. And by the way, this is not the way it's going to be. I have so much stuff that needs to go here. This will be completely organized to make sure I make most of the space. But let's say I don't need this anymore, right? We get it away, and all of a sudden I buy this thing, much higher, right? Doesn't fit there, but this is the available space I have. So what am I going to do? Easy. Here we go. And the floor is found his new house. Super easy, really fast, shelves really easily movable, lower, higher, let's go higher here. Look at that, any configuration. You can put shelves on top there, you can put shelves at the bottom, on the floor, you can leave the floor without the shelves. It's just amazingly flexible. I'm really happy with it, and I'm sure I'll make really good use. And finally, I can actually walk in. I don't need anymore to jump over stuff to get something that was sitting at the back. No more of that. This will help me to create space here. This is all going to go away, and I'll be creating more space for more woodworking machines. In fact, I'm planning to put a jointer planer here, small ones, with a dust collection system, but that's something that's going to be done in a new video. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you liked the build. One thing I had to make sure, this is not my design. I'm not sure if I already said this before. I found this on the internet. There is like a million different ways to make this type of, let's say, garage shelves. This one was the one I liked because of the flexibility, and I basically just replicated it. So if you like to make one of those, go ahead. It's really simple. Can be done by one person. You've seen it. If you have someone to help you, it's faster. Otherwise, take your time, and good luck with it. So thank you for watching, and if you like this build, consider to subscribe to the channel. Bye.